An analysis by PolitiFact tells us who the least and most trustworthy candidates of the 2016 field are. Now, it will not surprise you who is on the least trusted candidates list. Now, first, let's go through some of the details here. Now, PolitiFact was founded by the Tampa Bay Times in 2007, right? And they're designed to basically examine not everything that a politician says, but some of the more outrageous things, right? And they do so in order to determine facts. So they actually try to fact check candidates as best as they can. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. Now, the website doesn't check every politician's or candidate's statements. You can't. It would literally be impossible to fact check every single thing that they say. So they just check the ones that are more likely to provoke the most debate. But even by that standard, boy, do they have their work cut out for them, especially on the Republican side. Now, PolitiFact editor Angie Dobrik discussed in a recent piece for the New York Times. Now, according to this piece, PolitiFact has found that the biggest liar of this election cycle is not Hillary Clinton. Actually, that honor goes to one Dr. Ben Carson. Yes, Dr. Ben Carson. Now, of his 25 statements, fact-checked, not a single one turned out to be true. Only one was rated mostly true, 3 are half true, and 21 of Carson's statements, a full 84% of those fact-checked, were declared either mostly false, entirely false, or, my favorite, pants on fire. Interesting. Now, as I said, they checked about 25 different statements from Dr. Ben Carson, and they listed some of the most ludicrous ones. So here's some of the ones where he got hit on. For instance, he incorrectly claimed that Thomas Jefferson helped craft the Declaration of Independence. That's not exactly true. Not only that, but he said that none of the founding fathers had any elected experience. Once again, that is completely not true. He's got kind of a loose grasp of history. I mean, this is a guy who thought the pyramids were created to store grain. Not exactly a history buff, Dr. Ben. So, there's that. Now, some of his claims are stupid, but also dangerous. One of them being about vaccines. Now, Donald Trump actually had about 3 times as many statements fact-checked by PolitiFact, only got a little bit better than Carson. According to PolitiFact, 76% of his remarks were rated either mostly or completely false. And 16% of Trump's statements were called pants on fire. And just like Ben Carson, not a single one of Trump's assertions was judged to be true. Now, as Trump's statements, a lot of them are just incredibly gross exaggerations. For example, he said when President Obama wanted to accept 250,000 Syrian refugees. Well, that of course is fact-checked to be wrong. There's only about 10,000 refugees that President Obama has pushed to accept, not 250,000. Or, here's kind of a whopper, and we've covered this before. He retweeted a claim from a white supremacist group that black people are responsible for 81% of white murders. Holy shit. Now, immediately people, tweeted him back or looked at this and they found out that, not only is this not true, but the place that supposedly looked at this and came up with this fact doesn't even exist. The real truth about that is, of course, white people are actually responsible for 82% of white murders. So that's the fact on that. Now, the third should really not surprise you either. It's Ted Cruz, the third most dishonest politician in 2016. Of the 65 Cruz statements evaluated, 66%, 2/3, were rated mostly false or worse. Now, Cruz does better than Trump and Carson, because at least he got a couple of true statements. Oh wow, amazing. And 11 mostly true statements and only 8 half-truths. Now, a lot of his stuff was, of course, about Obamacare. For example, he said that Obama had granted all of Congress an exception to the health care law. That's actually not true. And that virtually every American has seen premiums go up. Once again, that's not true. And the plan would cost twice as much as originally expected. Now, did the price go up? Has it cost more than originally expected? Of course. But it's about 8.6% more than expected. That's not as much as half. So, there you go. Carly Fiorina, she's got a pretty bad record. About half of her statements were found to be false. And Fiorina likes to talk statistics, right? But a lot of her statistics are wrong. For example, she said during one of the debates that 92% of the jobs lost during President Obama belong to women, and that 79% of people living in poverty are women. In fact, abject poverty, which is what she looked at, is actually split evenly among men and women. And figures from the Bureau of Labor Statistics show 416,000 women joined the workforce between January 2009 and January 2013. Now, going up the list, you had Chris Christie, Rand Paul, and Jeb Bush that are tied with about 32% of their respective statements rated fully or mostly untrue. Marco Rubio follows with 40% of a statement called more or less false. So that leaves us to Democratic candidates. Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton each had only 28% of their statements ruled false or mostly false. And Clinton was found prone to more personal exaggerations. Or when she, some of them, one of them was Benghazi, right? She called that Congress's longest investigation ever. Or when she said her and Bill were dead broke. Not exactly true. Sanders, Bernie Sanders, according to this, tends to make some inaccurate statements about America's place in the world. For example, when it comes to things like the hours Americans work or the amount spent on health care. All to be fair. Now, Bernie Sanders holds the distinction of being the only one of two candidates with no pants on fire ratings. The other one, surprisingly enough, the most honest politician, is Martin O'Malley. What is this? But wait, here's what's interesting about that. A little bit of a caveat. He actually had the fewest number of fact-check statements. He had about 16 compared to Sanders' 43 and Clinton's 140. But of his 16 statements, only 28% of them were judged to be false or mostly false. Now, that either makes O'Malley the most truthful candidate or the most under-scrutinized. I tend to go with the latter. I think he hasn't exactly... I mean, that's sort of the problem with the Democratic field, is that they're not paying any attention to that. When you have debates that are on a Saturday that get, at the most, 8 million people, a quarter of what the Republican debates, and when the media doesn't really care about them, I did some statistics in the last story about how much the media covers Bernie Sanders, which is very, very, very little. Well, Clinton gets a little bit more than that, but Martin O'Malley, you look at Martin O'Malley, he almost gets no coverage. So I think he's under-scrutinized. But nonetheless, I still think he would rank much, much higher than any other Republican and still be within the field of Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton when it comes to being the most truthful candidate. So when it comes to who's being honest with you and who's not, Well, you can see that the Democrats are far more honest with you than not, especially when compared to the Republicans, which kind of underscores the old statement that that truth has a liberal bias.